He's back. CNN has done a 180 and is returning to the chair, an anchor they once threw out, Brian Stelter. Stelter's previously the host of CNN's media show, Reliable Sources, and was also the lead author of the Reliable Sources newsletter. After nearly a decade, Stelter got fired in August of 2022 when CNN's then network boss, Chris Licht, canceled his show on the grounds that it was biased. Media reporter Oliver Darcy took over handling the newsletter. Stelter then went on to freelance for a variety of outlets and even wrote a book. But last month, Darcy announced he was leaving CNN to start his own independent media newsletter. And surprise, surprise, Stelter is going to return to CNN as a chief media analyst, lead writer of the Reliable Sources newsletter. He's not getting the show back, but his announcement suggests, I think, that he will be appearing on camera to do media analysis, not having his own show, but appearing on other people's shows. The Twitterverse is having a ball with this news, as Brian Stelter was not a particularly popular character among the right. Tim Pool quoted actual photo of Brian Stelter just before CNN brought him back. Love the Loki reference there. Podcaster Jimmy Dore tweeted, quote, "Guess who won't be returning to CNN? The viewers." And several have shared part of this clip from Stelter back in 2020, questioning the Hunter Biden laptop story, or rather not questioning it. Let's watch.
There's a lot about this story that does not add up. And the employee has not helped matters. He has contradicted himself in interviews with reporters. And, I mean, for all we know, these emails are made up, or maybe some are real and others are fakes. We don't know. But we do know that this is a classic example of the right-wing media machine.
So Brian Stelter is back, and I should say, as much as he gets really, really trashed by the right, I've been on CNN, the handful of times I've been on was to be on his show, so at least appreciated a diversity of opinions enough to let little old Robby have a turn, so I will always be grateful to that, and I've always gotten along with him, but yes, the show became a kind of prime example of the liberal bias that so many conservatives, and frankly, people on the left as well, I think were not big fans of the show, and how it just, everything was about the threat of Trump and very one-sided and never delving in too deeply and just obsessed with the minutia of Trump says this, Trump says that. That was what Brian Stelter was known for. So I don't know what this says about CNN's business decision making. They're thinking that he's being brought back. I was a little taken aback by this news yesterday. What do you make of it, Jessica?
I don't know much about Stelter. I don't think he's someone that I've ever watched. I think young people increasingly get their news online and are not watching cable. So, when he was fired, it was the first I'd heard of him. But the way he's put his new life change is he uses video game language, which is always a signal to me that someone might be a little bit lonely. I don't know, might be a little bit of a member of the incel community, if you will, to refer to life in terms of a video game. But nevertheless, he said, quote, "I loved my old life as the anchor of a Sunday morning show, but to borrow some lingo from my video game blogger days, I finished that level of the game. Time for new levels, new challenges." So I don't know how you feel about my categorization of video game language, Robby, but this is like a 39-year-old man saying he's leveling up and he finished that level. I don't know. It's a little weird.
Yeah, I'm a 36-year-old man, and I did, in fact, spend last night playing video games by myself in my apartment. So I guess I'm a fellow traveler of Stelter in that way. I use video game language all the time to reference such things. But yeah. So here we are with, I think, CNN going back to bringing back an old player in their midst. One kind of was wondering whether they got the idea that just relentlessly being obsessed with Trump, it was not delivering to viewers. They wanted to pivot in a different direction, but this maybe signals that maybe they expect a Trump presidency. I think this is a weird person to bring back in for a Kamala Harris presidency because his specialty is being obsessed with the foibles of the right and Trump's antics. I guess Trump, of course, will still be on the political scene even if he loses, but maybe this is an expectation that Trump is actually going to win.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, to have someone come back after firing them is, I think, a lens into what mainstream media is like. That they really don't have their finger on the pulse so much. They don't know what people really want. To just fire someone and then bring them back some years later. I mean, we've seen so many hosts recycled before. Chris Cuomo, for one, who's on News Nation now, a lot of people talk about his firing and say, well, if it was your sibling and you were in that position, what would you do? Right. And I think that's why people still watch Chris Cuomo and respect Chris Cuomo, because they kind of disagree with the reason for his firing in the first place. And they think he's a good news anchor. I think maybe the media makes decisions too rapidly about firing personnel, because at the end of the day, if they have an audience, if they have viewers, that's what you're paying for. And so, yeah, Chris Licht might have not personally liked the guy, but I think it was maybe a bad business decision, because clearly he has a role in CNN somewhere.
Chris Licht obviously did not survive at CNN either,
Right.
so the changes he made were not perceived to be moving things in the right direction whatsoever. So, there's been so much chaos and turnover at CNN. Obviously, they fired Don Lemon as well. I think that was under Chris Licht that happened. Same day as Tucker Carlson. They buried that news on the infamous day of Tucker's firing from Fox News. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe Brian Stelter's learned something from his time off. He's done some interesting reporting from other outlets. I think his writing is a lot more nuanced and compelling than the TV show was. But we'll have to see if he's learned from his experience. And Chris Cuomo, as you mentioned, is someone now who's on our sister channel, News Nation, and I think does a lot of really interesting interviews with a whole range of people. I think, not that I would wish being fired on anyone, but I think it learned from that experience and has really been able to broaden the things he talks about, and he did a discussion with Tucker, right? I think, and with Dave Smith, and with a lot of interesting people who he's disagreed with on the past. So you can, you can get. You can learn, and you can broaden your horizons, and you can become a more interesting media figure. I've certainly learned a lot from doing this show in the time I've been doing it. I think I have a much less narrow perspective than I did when I started. I think I no longer presume that people who are saying or have said things I've disagreed with in the past, that necessarily means I'm going to always disagree with them, or like if I thought you were wrong about this. I have to assume you're wrong about everything. I was more inclined to think that way in the past, and now I'm like, well, I disagree with them on this, but I do agree with them on this. That's part of just doing, a debate show where you talk to people, all over the political spectrum. I think that's a valid way to conduct oneself, and we'll see if it makes the network any different.
Yeah, certainly not many avenues for that kind of learning in mainstream media, but it does sound like, from his own reflection, Stelter learned something from his time away from being, a Sunday news host. He said his time off and bumpy departure from CNN allowed him to experience the news more like an everyday consumer, which I guess is a very different perspective from telling the news versus, reading what interests you. And he honed in his focus on the attention economy and the information ecosystem. So to think that he was further away from the attention economy and the information ecosystem when he was at CNN than when he was away from it, I think says more about CNN than anything, Robby.
Well, that does it for us today on Rising. Thank you all for watching. We will be back tomorrow with another episode of our show. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, now available anywhere you can find podcasts. See you back here tomorrow.
Bye, y'all.